Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, baby metal fan, and today I want to post a video that some of you may have seen on either Discord or on another channel on YouTube. It's an interview I did with Dead Man of Rant and Chill, where he talks about Japanese music particularly and baby metal in particular, and so I thought I would let you guys see what we talked about. Low-key, interesting conversation. Have at it.
All right, guys. Welcome to Rant and Chill, channel where I like to rant and I like to chill. It's a very simple concept. Here I'm going to be chilling with AJ Hartley. How is it going, man?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing all right. A little grumpy as it is in the morning, but this coffee will power me through. And you're good company, of course.
Let's hope so.
I think it will. Hey, by the way, I think we were chatting beforehand. You seen the Big Fox 5 Festival?
Yeah, a while ago.
Yeah, man. I saw that last night. It was amazing. Okay. All right.
Yeah, those big shows or something.
Now, I've been wanting to talk to you for a while, and because I see you as like the baby metal professor, maybe not the baby metal scholar. You probably are. I don't know. You probably know like all the ins and outs, like a super fan. But you're definitely the baby metal professor. Is that you think that's an accurate description?
I guess so, but I think your distinction is a good one. I don't think I know as much about the band and their history and the specifics of everything that they've done than a lot of fans. I think a lot of people out there who know more than I do. What I do is I tend to dig into a particular thing, a song or something, and, flex my, I don't know, my sort of academic nerd muscles or something to try and figure out what I think is going on in that particular song. But yeah, I think there are lots of people out there who know more than I do.
And that's fair enough to say. I mean, you're right. There's a lot of fans out there that know every single detail there is to know about baby metal. Like the lore is pretty extensive. But your strength there, it seems to be like you're able to look at it from a historical perspective of wait. Let's pause real fast. For anyone who doesn't know who you are, what do you do and why do you do it? Let's get a little bit of that first.
Okay, so I have a YouTube channel, and I always introduce myself as a novelist and a Shakespeare professor, which is basically how I've paid my bills for the last 30 years. So yeah, I'm a writer. I write lots of different things: mystery, thriller, fantasy, sci-fi, some for kids, some for adults, some with Japanese content. And I've also been a Shakespeare professor. I just retired from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where I've been for the last 18 years. I'm primarily a performance theorist and specialist. I'm a director and dramaturg. And I publish a lot on Shakespeare and early modern drama.
Okay, that's quite extensive there. So, and how did you get from that to, starting a channel regarding baby metal? There's a leap between Shakespeare and baby metal. Are they the same?
Well, it's funny. I do think that there are more overlaps than people realize. I was particularly excited when the Mirror Mirror song came out.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Quoted Shakespeare. But, long ago, I used to live in Japan, and my wife is Japanese American, and so we have retained a long connection to Japan over the last 35 years. In terms of music and such, I had always dipped in and out of Japanese music. And when I got into baby metal, I didn't do anything with it. I was just a fan. Then the channel specifically was a pandemic thing. It came out of sitting in the house by myself a lot and needing to talk about things that I cared about. And I one day just, I don't even know why, I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna make a song about, I'm gonna make a video about a baby metal song, just talk about it. And it wasn't intended to be channel per se. It wasn't intended to be a series. It was a one-off. I just thought this is a cool thing, and I want to talk about why I think it's cool. And in the process, because this is the kind of person I am, I want to use it as a way of trying to figure out why I like this, what I find interesting about it. And it became a thing that it's suddenly, like, almost immediately, I don't know why or how, but I started getting, a lot of responses from fans. And so I thought, well, I'll do some more. And then it got to the stage where I was making a video a week or thereabouts, gradually working my way through the whole sort of baby metal canon. And that's where we are. And
Wow.
along the way, I started incorporating other Japanese bands that I like and listen to. And for a long time, those videos had very, very low viewing numbers, and it was just the baby metal stuff that was getting a lot of attention. But now I also get a lot of attention for my stuff on Atarashi Gakko, who've had a huge year. I've been listening to them for a while, but
Okay,
they just
I know that
really
group. I know that group. Yeah, yeah.
took off here. Suddenly I'm getting a lot of views on that stuff as well.
I like them a lot. My reactions tend to get blocked, though I don't really challenge it. I'm sure if I did, maybe, or if I asked, to appeal it, maybe they would unblock it. But I just never really did.
You noticed a shift in the blocking stuff? Because I used to get a lot more blocking than I do now. Every single time I'd make a video, would get blocked, and I'd have to take it down and re-edit it and mess things around, and that almost never happens now.
I've noticed a difference lately. Sometimes baby metal stuff, like especially unofficial stuff, will get blocked, but if I appeal it, they'll let it through, and so it's like, and it's totally up to like the people who own the rights to it. If they want to keep the block, I understand. It's like, it's their stuff, whatever. It's their toys. I'm the one asking to play with it. It's their stuff. I'm asking to play with it.
When I do mine, I try to make sure that I'm never showing a clip that is longer than 30 seconds.
Well, yeah, that's a smart thing to do if you want to be able to use it, and also be able to, generate some money on the side from it. Though the money's probably not the most important part.
My channel's not monetized.
Oh, it's not even monetized. Okay. Well, that's so. I like what you said there. So, from the pandemic, you wanted something to do, so you started doing it. Looking at these, looking at a particular baby metal song, it was called One Off, and it just became something. That's really cool to hear. It wasn't even intended to become what it is now. Right. Where someone like me, a layman, be like, who drinks all day, be like, oh, he's the baby metal professor. Okay, so people recognize it. You definitely get that respect there.
Well, thanks, man.
Oh, no problem. It's much deserved. So, now, what would you say to people who would say baby metal, but isn't baby metal, like, their music is like shallow? There can't be any depth to it. What do you say to that?
I totally disagree. I think that part of what I like about baby metal is that this stuff is so rich and layered and complicated, and I think it's one of those things that towards reflection. The more you sort of look at it and process exactly what songs are doing, the more you get out of it. And I think that's kind of intentional. I think that part of the way that they work is that they like to put out things that are open to scrutiny, that invite different interpretations and different readings and so on. What I do is not supposed to be definitive. It's not supposed to be like the answer. It's supposed to be, a thoughtful response to the song. Other people might have totally different takes on it. And I think that, clearly the music itself, instrumentally and everything, is super intricate and carefully put together, and that's obvious, I think, to most people. So I don't understand why they assume that the lyrics aren't. I don't understand why they think that when a band works for a long time on a song,
Hmm.
that the idea being sort of thrown together somewhat randomly and no one's giving it any thought. That doesn't make sense to me, either as a critic or as an artist, right? As a novelist as a writer in my own right, as a theater maker in my own right. I know how much work and how much thought goes into tiny moments that most people will not pay attention to. So
Right.
I tend to think, give them the benefit of the doubt, looking at something and see if you can figure out what's going on and how it works, how it plays, which is not necessarily what they intend. Finally, I'm not that interested in what they intend. I'm interested in what they have made that I can do something with. The listener,
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And you got a lot of that also probably comes from baby metal haters who probably don't even see them as even being metal. Okay, those are sort of
Yeah.
people who'd be like, "Oh, but baby metal, there's no way they can have depth to their songs." But you're right. I mean, if they spend a lot of time working on these songs, especially the lyrics, there's definitely some sort of meaning to it. Now, while you may not be so concerned about what they intend with it, it is something curious to explore and how you interpret it, right? It's like, well, like what does this song mean to you? What do you find interesting about it? And so,
And I should clarify.
Okay.
I mean, I don't. It's not that I don't care what the intention is behind the song. I do care,
Okay.
but I don't think that's the only way of reading what the song means. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, okay.
I
I
think
got you.
that
I got you. I got you.
the author of any product, whatever the art object is, what the artist is trying to produce matters. But sometimes, especially if the artist isn't that good, what they intend and what comes out are not necessarily the same thing, right?
That is true. Yeah.
But in the end, I think meaning is about how the audience receives it rather than what the artist intended to do. So you can try to figure out what that artist is doing and then factor in of other stuff. I mean, because to give you an example, I remember this is weird, but years ago, 2001, I was working on a Shakespeare production, major company in Atlanta, and it was a production of Julius Caesar. There was a particular moment that we wanted audience to see as reflective of the area's own racial history.
Okay.
It was a sort of, a few nights before the show opened was September 11th. And it completely changed the way that moment played on stage. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Something we had no control over, couldn't possibly have anticipated, happened, and it changed the audience. And the audience then read the moment that we had intended quite specifically to play in a certain way, and they saw it playing in a completely different way. And we were like, okay, that's the nature of theater, right? That you can't force people to read it the way you want them to read it. They're going to read it the way. So, yeah. So I think that happens all the time. That's a particularly big, dramatic example, but I think that happens all the time. A song goes out into the world and it changes, right? And people hear it differently.
True. Very true.
We were talking earlier before we started about monochrome.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting that in interviews, Sue has said that her sense of that song changed because of the audience response. When she first started working on it, was first recording it, it was a very she thought of it as quite a light, upbeat sort of song. And then all these audience responses come in thinking about elements of World War or the Hiroshima bombings and all this sort of stuff. And she said that changed the way she thought about the song. And I think she now plays it, performing it, she plays it quite sort of seriously and, in a different sort of way. So I think that stuff is interesting.
Yeah. I mean, that is an interesting thing there, right? Sue thought of one way, and the audience thought of another way. And I think of it this way: while Sue maybe thought it was like a kind of more like an upbeat sort of song. Someone like me who, I mean, when I heard that song, I was reflecting on like the horrors of World War II, of like the bombings. I'm like, and like I was like, I can't even fathom what it'd be like to go through that. And it's I thought it was a sad song in a way, it's like, but I
think some of the way that we respond to that as audiences was about the video as well.
Yeah, that's true.
She didn't necessarily have any hand in, right? She may not have even seen it until it was done. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the imagery in that video, I think, pointed people in towards reading it in that sort of Second World War kind of context. So then, for me, this is fascinating because it's like, well, to what extent is the video actually a part of the song, or should we be treating the song as a completely separate thing?
Oh, that's a good question. I were looking at this song too, but first, you said something I want to touch on. You said that there's some songs that may even call for scrutiny. Now, scrutiny is interesting, AJ. Okay, what level of scrutiny we're talking about? We're talking about is there a song that really calls for scrutiny?
I mean, I think that I think like a lot of people, "Gimme Chocolate" was the first song that I heard, and when I first heard it, I was like, "Wow, this is I'm having flashbacks to all kinds of things about Japan," and I thought it was cool and interesting and fun, but I didn't take it seriously. And it took me a little while to come back to it and rethink it. And I think that part of the reason that it took me a while was because I had to discover some other songs that were more obviously demanding scrutiny. So something like Megitsune.
Okay.
As soon as I saw that song, I was like, wait a minute. Some really interesting stuff going on here. And I have to dig into this just to get a handle on what these guys are doing, who they are, and what they're about, because there's this really interesting tension in its way of exploring elements of Japanese traditional culture. I thought I have to sort of scrutinize, right? I have to dig into it a little bit. And when I do that, and I start to find things that I think make it worth the effort, for me at least, when I come out the other side of that analysis, liking the song more than when I went in, and to me that's valuable because it's got extra layers and complexities and things that, and I realize not everybody cares about this, but I do. It's just, I'm hardwired that way, that I appreciate songs. I mean, I appreciate silly, goofy, shallow songs that have one idea and one message and stuff. That's fine. But I really appreciate stuff that have more things going on, little sort of wrinkles and tweaks and extra levels of complexity and stuff. I love that. And so every time I scrutinize a BABYMETAL song and find more stuff, I mentioned to you before, I just made a video on Believing. Song off the other one, which I had not intended to make a video about at all because it's in English. I thought, well, I mean, it's completely self-evident. All the lines make perfect sense. Oh, it's perfectly clear. And then somebody had said to me, "Oh, well, why don't you do something on Believing?" And I was like, "Why would I do that?" And I started looking at it. It's like, actually, it doesn't make sense at all.
Right.
Each line is perfectly clear, but what it adds up to is really, really complicated and open to various interpretations. So that's, for me, where I get sort of fascinated and excited, and my sense of the songs get broader and deeper, and I like that.
That's pretty cool. I got to ask a little bit. I'm definitely going to ask about Believing, but since you mentioned "Give Me Chocolate," what is the depth of "Give Me Chocolate"? What is going on in that song? Because on the surface, it's like they're talking about eating chocolate, or scrutiny, or I guess they're kind of like asking themselves, should they eat this because of concerns about their, I guess, weight and whatever. What's going on with "Give Me Chocolate"?
Yeah, I mean, I think "Gimme Chocolate" is actually a more interesting song than people realize, and I think, with obviously it's light and playful and goofy, and you know that's undeniable. But I also do think that it's a very adolescent song, a song about particular young persons and young Japanese women's views about senses of obligation, senses of body image, and the song obviously is called "Gimme Chocolate." There is
Yeah.
something called giddy chocolate in Japan, and giddy chocolate is obligation chocolate, and it's something that on Valentine's Day in Japan, uh, women have to give chocolate to practically every man they know, and it's called giddy chocolate, obligation chocolate.
Oh wow.
Then a month later, the men give chocolate to the women they like. So it's really interesting and this sort of strangely loaded cultural thing where the women out of obligation, have to give gifts, and then the men have a very different kind of obligation, which allows them to choose to a certain
Okay.
extent. I mean,
Yeah.
changing some. But I do think it's really interesting that it's called giddy chocolate, right? And so the song becomes about eating it for yourself rather than giving it to somebody you don't particularly want to out of a
Ah.
sense of
Okay.
social.
All right. That's cool. That's pretty cool. I like.
I mean, little
See,
things like that.
this is why you're considered the professor. Now, eventually in this talk, I will ask about divine attack, and I think when we talk about divine attack, we might get into like we touch a little bit about history with monochrome, but I asked some question about divine attack. Now, all right. Now, what about believing? Because it sounds like believing really surprised you. What really surprised you about that song?
It surprised me, as I say, because every line is perfectly clear. The English is
Right.
clear, and so you're listening to it and you're like, yes, I get it, I get it, I get it. And then the song makes these little jumps conceptually, and at the end of it, you're like, wait a minute, what is that actually about? I don't know that I understand that. And I think that and it's complicated further by the way the song was presented, this stuff about the reverse mirror image
Hmm.
and so on. And so I think that it's actually quite a complex sort of I think I read it in a quite existential kind of way about trying to figure out who you are and what you stand for. But this question of the title, believing what you believe, because it's not believe in yourself or believe in somebody else. It's believing. It's about finding truth, which is a different issue. And sitting that next to the sort of temporal reflection on the seasons change
Yeah.
and time passes and people change and so on. It's like putting those two things together, the truth telling and the sense of temporality, I think is actually quite tricky. And so
Oh,
what I did in
interesting.
the video was sort of work through it and talk about various possibilities and then present like 4 different ways of reading the song.
Wow. So it's like, what is truth if truth changes like the seasons, right?
Yeah.
Something like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that video should go live end of next week.
That's pretty cool. And I recall reading an interview with BABYMETAL where he talked about how in the other one there's certain songs. Actually, I mean, he's kind of said about all of them really. About they're much more open for interpretation because it's not really what it seems, especially believing.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you look at an item, like this is a dirty shot glass. So I know you can't see it because the camera's being used by the stream. This is a dirty shot glass. It's been sitting here for a while. But if you look at it from this way, is it still a shot glass? Or if you look at it at the bottom, you know? Now, I'm like a nuts and bolts sort of guy. I'm like, well, I mean, it's still a glass, but is it really a glass? I mean, you look at that. I mean, it's right. It's like things change based on how you perceive it, and kind of like that,
With
right?
BABYMETAL, yeah, often with BABYMETAL, there is a kind of Zen Buddhist uh, sort of cultural underpinning as well. There's this sort of constant sense that reality is in some ways an illusion, that there's some sort of spiritual truth beyond it, and so that the things that we take as being real are not necessarily truly real. Does that
Oh
make
wow.
sense?
Yeah, it does. That does. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Okay. Uh man. All right. What has been a song that really challenged you with your like because you're an author, you're right. And from understand historical fiction too, right? So has there been a song that really challenged you challenge you in that area, right, where you're like, man, I have to really explore this. I get to really flex my muscle, my sense of history, my knowledge of history. What has been a song like that for you?
That's a good question. I mean, there are a number of songs that draw. Okay, so in terms of, obviously, there's lots of different ways of thinking about history. I think one of the hardest parts of Japanese history to talk about for me is relatively recent cultural history.
Okay.
So that, for example, we know that from time to time, Koba and other elements within baby metal draw on things from the relatively recent history
Like
in
Pokemon.
pop.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
Yeah, but also like wrestling and
Yeah.
baseball and other bands and such, and that can be hard to spot. When you, as a foreigner like me, because I haven't lived in Japan for a while, I go back a lot, but I'm not an active part of Japanese culture. So, I'll see a line in a song, and I'll be analyzing the line and trying to make sense of it, and then a Japanese person will say, actually, this is a line that was used, a really famous catchphrase used by a comedian in the 1980s. Like, okay, how the hell am I supposed to get that? I
Yeah.
would never have figured that out for myself. So that kind of history, comparatively recent cultural history, I think is really hard to access, because it's one of those things that you either get it on a gut level, you immediately recognize it. It's not in the same way that I don't know how old you are, but there are things that I remember from my childhood, from the 70s or whatever, from British TV, that everybody in the UK of my age knows. And as soon as you hear that phrase or that image, it immediately speaks to us about those things. That's a really hard thing to find if you're not part of that culture.
Oh, you're so right about that. You'd have to know. You'd have to be. It's much more than just knowing the language. You'd have to be like immersed in it. Oh man.
Yeah. So when I'm doing a translation or something, I usually find myself talking to Japanese people who are going to pick up on those kind of cultural references, because otherwise I'm going to miss it. There's no way. I can't. That sort of stuff is not going to come to me from a dictionary, and it's not.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, like in Metataro, for example, a lot of the lyrics are based around things that are specifically found in Japanese baseball.
I like that you mentioned that. I literally, like I said, I reacted to the Big Fox 5 festival last night, and Metataro came on. I was like, Metataro, not my favorite song, but it's a cool song. It was cool. It was amazing to see that performance. That performance was fantastic. And I was like, I thought it was more like a sounds with the military sort of drumming. It kind of sounds more like a fanfare for like celebrating a hero or some prestigious person. And they're like, "Oh no, it's baseball." Oh, well, it's baseball.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the hero stuff as well. And when I made the video that I did on Metataro, I talked a lot about things like Ultraman.
Ultraman, yeah. I was like, "Hey, this is an Ultraman song, right?"
Right. And that particular form of Japanese sort of superhero stuff, but also, Buto Base Metata, that's baseball stuff. But I would not have got that without it being pointed out to me by a Japanese person.
I didn't get into it. It was pointed out by my chat watching live. It was like, did you miss Sue doing the home run swing? I was like, Yeah, I guess I did. I did. I did actually.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because we have these conversations, or I make these videos, and other people post stuff, and it becomes part of a kind of shared body of fan knowledge.
Yeah.
Often we don't know exactly where we got certain pieces of information, but they get passed on, and advances the conversation, I suppose.
That's what I really enjoy about this. It's sort of what I enjoy talking to people, fans, like, before the show and stuff. It's like getting to learn things. And all the whole pissing match, like, oh, are you really a fan or this, that? It's like, that gets kind of boring, and there's not really much depth to that. But, like, the lore stuff, that is really cool. That is really cool. On that note, has there been any other, like, surprises that, like, regarding like baby metal lore within the lyrics and stuff, like things like that you've discovered, especially from fans?
I mean, I have a kind of, I have mixed feelings about the lore, to be honest, because often I know some fans really invest in it, and they look for these sort of big macro narratives and how everything fits together. And I generally don't buy it.
Oh, you mean like the Fox God?
I think it's a way of organizing songs in a show, and it's a way of creating this sort of slightly.
Hey, don't disrespect the Fox God, okay?
Praise
be Fox God. Sorry.
Absolutely. I don't know that there is a really sort of complex story being told on this sort of macro level as far as the lore is concerned. And I think there are holes at the times when people are like, wait, I don't understand. If they went here, then how are they here? And what's going on? And I'm like, well, because I think you're taking it too seriously. I think it's
Yeah.
sort of a gag,
Yeah, it's not a religion.
Exactly.
I mean,
not a religion.
I don't think they actually worship. Okay, guys, you might be surprised by this, but guess what? They don't actually worship the Fox God. I don't think BABYMETAL actually believes this. Okay, I think it's more fun, if anything. Okay,
I think so too. And it's far from clear what the Fox God actually is.
Not the Pokemon.
Right?
I'm just joking. I don't know about that. Yeah. God. Oh, so yeah. I don't think they're so concerned about the Fox God keeping it cohesive, but there's things throughout, like mini lores, like, okay, like, so BABYMETAL Galaxy was supposed to be like a tour, like around the world sort of thing, like with the future metal kind of setting it up, and I think for the most part the album does that, but then towards the end it becomes like, well, actually we're gonna focus like on that album, like every song except for like maybe the later half have like a theme that's from like a different part of the world. Yeah.
Right.
But then
once you hit the Trilogy of Lights songs,
the Trilogy of Lights, it's sort of like, okay, well, now we're going to go back to Japan and just kind of focus on that to pay respect to Mikio. Right? What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that, and before you referred to the other one as a concept album, and I know that it was presented in those terms, but I don't know that it really is in a meaningful sense. I felt a little bit the same with Metal Galaxy, that obviously that sort of intro provides a rationale for why we're sort of dropping it. Here's an Indian song, and here's sort of Euro disco thing, and here, and great, that's fine. I don't finally need it to be absolutely coherent and unified,
right.
And I think that the album is fairly clearly not. And I think something similar is going on with the other one, where it's a concept album, a way of justifying what I suspect are a number of fairly old songs, revamped and rethought and put together and shaped in this slightly different way.
Okay.
And I think, you know, it's coming out of that hiatus period when they're not touring and not playing live, so it's even more studio heavy than their stuff usually is,
Mm.
and therefore sound different. I think you can hear a shift in the sound between the other one and Metalli, for example.
Yeah, yeah, I could agree with that.
Feel much liver as a song, vocally, instrumentally. And so that sort of digital packaging of the other one makes a kind of sense. But the idea that there's a coherent narrative there within that album, where it's exploring a single idea or a single story, I don't think I buy that, and I don't care. I
Yeah,
mean, I think packaging it as a concept album was, like a lot of things with Baby Metal, more about marketing than it was about telling you about the aesthetics or the artistry of the material itself.
yeah, I
That
kind
doesn't
of agree
bother me.
with that. I agree with that because I did look at the album. I did a video. I tried to analyze it with my ability to do so as a concept album, and some songs just don't really connect. Like I mean,
Yeah.
you would have to like kind of bend backwards to find a way to really connect some of the songs. Like I could find a connection between some, like Divine Attack and Monochrome to me, and this is where
Yeah.
we can get into like looking at these two songs like in a historical perspective. We little touch on Monochrome a little bit with like, you know, World War II and stuff, but like they seem to be about, in my opinion, like events specific to Japan, like historical events. Like I looked at like Divine Attack as like, I thought it was like a play on Divine Winds, or the phrase kamikaze, or being something related to like the Mongols invasion, at least their attempt to. So I looked at it from that perspective, kind of like I'll look at Monochrome from like perspective of, oh, this sounds like like, you know, World War II and after the bombings and stuff. So I see those two songs connected in that way, but I don't see any other songs pertaining to those events unless I'm looking at these songs completely backwards. So Professor, what do you think of that?
I agree, but I also think that, you know, a little before album came out, I had Jim Fusilli on my channel to talk specifically about concept albums, and he was a rock critic for the Wall Street Journal, and he really knows his stuff. And you know, one of the things that emerged out of that conversation was that most of the albums that are generally considered concept albums are not.
uh
You know, if what you're looking for is the kind of cohesion and unity and connection between songs, it's like, you know, people always talk about Sergeant Pepper, the Beatles album, Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, as a concept album. It's not. It has an opening and a closing that kind of unify thing in between, but the songs themselves along the way are not all clearly unified in any meaningful way. Even something like King Crimson's Court of the Crimson King, one side, one song, but the other songs on the second side of the album are not clearly connected to it. I think that's, you think of Rush's 2112 concept album. Well, again, one side of it is. That one side, the actual 2112 narrative, has nothing to do with Passage to Bangkok and stuff like that on the other side of the album. I think things can become concept albums if we make the definition really loose. And in that case, then sure, the other one is a concept album. But if we want something a bit more stringent, something that demands these things finally mean something particular, that they're presenting an idea or a story or something, then no, I don't think it is.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right about that. And what are your thoughts on Divine Attack?
I mean, you know, the moment I heard it, I thought this is a sort of reworked version of Road of Resistance.
Yeah, that's something that's shared with other fans as well. They're like, kind of reminds me of Road of Resistance. Yeah.
I think it's a little sort of darker and grungier, Road of Resistance. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't know. Maybe somebody knows this, but it wouldn't surprise me to know that it was written around the same time, and they decided to use Road of Resistance over Divine Attack. Not because Road of Resistance is necessarily a better song, but because it was more in accord with what that album was going to feel like and where they were.
Yeah.
This was a song that they revisited and tweaked and refashioned and so on later on. So I think that there's a parallel between those two songs, and I do think that it's darker and more it's not as the Road of Resistance is that sort of big, rousing, crowd pleasing, anthemic kind of song,
right?
I think is bleaker and fits both the album and the cultural moment that we were in, right? Because again, it's a pandemic song and a lot of people were struggling.
Yeah.
And I think that, I really liked it right from the start. I think it's one of the stronger songs on the album. I think it's a retread of previous ideas. And that sometimes, and of course, this is supposedly written by Sue, yeah?
Yes, that's what is believed. Sue, I believe, said it herself in an interview.
Credited as a lyricist, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that of itself is really interesting. I talked about this when I made the video because, is the song lyrically devastatingly original? No, it's not. As I say, it's clearly connected to previous Baby Metal songs. But at the time, I took it as a good sign because it means that she's more involved in the production of the song, and it means she gets a copyright credit.
That's true.
That makes a big difference. And it means, and anything like that. This was at a time, remember, when a lot of fans were saying, oh, the band's going to stop. They're never going to come back. They're never going to tour again. They'll never release new music. And all of this, I was skeptical of those positions, but I understood the anxiety.
Right.
Things like the fact that he was more invested in the song, to me, was a really good sign. It's like, this is somebody into this and is investing more deeply rather than simply being a performer. And I think that's an investment.
Those were dark days. The pandemic around that time, dark days for not just Baby Metal, but for her other bands as well. Like Love Bites, one of my favorite bands of all time. Dark days.
Yep.
Well, we got through that though. And I'll say I agree with you, but it does sound similar to Road of Resistance. It has a kind of like energy to it, but it's different. Like you said, it's like a darker, grungier song. To me, it's like Road of Resistance is like a call to action. Yeah, we're gonna go and triumph against whatever the enemy is. But whereas Divine Attack is like we've taken heavy losses, we've been hurt, and we need to rally together because this is it. If we don't, then there's no other chance. Like, the opportunity is now. We got to rise. We got to do. So it's a very bold and cool song in that way.
It's a very, very Japanese sentiment, right?
Yeah.
We hear this hear it a lot in Baby Metal, but we hear it in other bands as well. That sort of Ganbarimashou kind of impulse that like things are not great, but the struggle is both essential and maybe an end in itself, right?
Yeah.
We might not actually be able to win, but it's important to fight anyway.
Right. And what do you think about that song from like a historical perspective? Like, do you see that same connection? I stumbled upon that. I was like, Divine Attack, Divine Winds, do you see any connection with that, or is it just like, what are your thoughts of that?
I mean, I tend to sort of, as you know, I tend to look for the Japanese title of Divine Attack is Shingeki, right?
Yeah.
So I think that in some ways the connection between Divine Attack and Divine Wind, Kamikaze, is kind of an accident of translation.
Okay.
Because Kamikaze is a specific thing, and Shingeki is a different word, right? It doesn't have those. It doesn't have those sounds in it to make. I think my instinct is that most Japanese people would be surprised to hear that connection.
Oh wow! Okay, that's cool.
Mm.
I'm always like, I think that sometimes when I'm like, how Koba Metal thinks, like how he perceives himself, presents himself in interviews like, I don't know if these things are accidents or they're intended.
No, I'm kicking myself. I bumped into him at the Atlanta show,
Oh, really?
really kicking myself for not sort of trying to have a real conversation with him. It was right after the show, and he was on his way backstage, and I was talking to somebody, and I turned around, and he was there, and I just sort of caught his eye, and I was like, holy crap, there, and I let it go, which was dumb, but there you go.
Oh, you'll have another opportunity. You'll have another chance. They'll be touring again. Hopefully, if nothing else crazy happens in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about the concept albums a little bit here. We talked about Divine Attack. What is your all-time? Do you have one favorite Baby Metal song? You sound like you would have like many, and it'd be hard to choose.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like a lot of things, with me, it changes over time.
Yeah.
For a long time, if you'd asked me that, I would have said Akatsuki, because it was, I think, the first song that I got really excited about and made me think there's so much going on with it. Between Megitsune and Akatsuki, and then I think Headbanger off the first album were the songs that sort of excited me about the group, and which I could go back to and listen to over and over again.
Ooh.
I think it changes quite a bit. If you ask me right now what songs I would be most likely to play, Monochrome, Kali, Kagero. I think Kagero is an underrated song. I really like that.
Yeah, okay. That was the one that was called Tattoo a little bit, right? That's the one. Yeah, Kagero. Yeah, that's a really good song. Now, you mentioned these. Have you spent time to analyze these songs?
Yes, and I, as I said before, my liking of the song tends to deepen the more I study it, the more I find interesting things. I mean, I even came out liking Omajinai better than I thought I would.
Oh, okay.
That's not likely to listen to very often, though. But
well, that's a drinking song, right? It has to be a drinking song, right?
I guess
it sounds
it's a
like
drinking song or a live performance song, but it's not a song that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all right. Well, oh man, what's going on with a song like Headbanger? On the surface, it seems pretty simple, but there seems to be a lore with that, being that it was passed on to Moa for her to sing for her special show for her birthday. Tell me, what was it?
Well, it's a song. I mean, lyrically, it's very specifically about a girl going to her first concert, right?
Yeah.
The thrill of that and the independence of traveling by herself and getting the ticket and traveling by herself and going to the show and being caught up in the experience, and I think it's a beautiful song. It's a fun song and a powerful song, but it's also a beautiful song because it taps into that key moment that as a sort of emblem of this speaks to me a lot as a writer of young adult fiction, right? Because one of the things that adults love about young adult fiction is that the stories are always in some ways about these formative moments in our adolescence when we start to determine the adults that we're going to be. We figure out who we are and what we want and what we want to become and what we stand for and what we'll fight for and all that kind of stuff. That's what YA literature is always about on some level. And this is what the song is about. The song is about exactly that moment where it sort of crystallizes in this one show. And we all have these kind of moments in our own past, I think, with these sort of definitive things that loom large when you look back on who you are and what you have become and how particular things have shaped you and got you excited and you've or made discoveries or so on. And I think this is why the song has been handed on to the younger members of the band because and that sort of crucial birthday celebration, because that's what the song is about. The song is about a sort of leaving childhood behind and stepping into an adulthood that you have chosen, not one that has been forced upon you, not one that is simply defined by who you are and where you were born and what your parents do and stuff like that, but something driven by your passions and your interests, your sense of the person that you want to be. So for me, it's actually a beautiful song as well as a fun and exciting song. Yeah.
I like the way you put that. That's something that was shared with a lot of fans, but it's a birthday song and stuff. But the way you articulate that was very great, very beautiful, man. Oh, look, we got a subscriber. Thanks, that was a little chime there. Now, we are running a little bit out of time, but I said about an hour, right? Before we, sign off, anything like that, I want to touch on two things. One, you mentioned in the beginning that there's more overlap between Shakespeare and BABYMETAL than what people may perceive. And then we'll talk a little bit about the other bands you cover as well. So let's start with the Shakespeare one.
I mean, obviously this sounds ridiculous, but Shakespeare, what makes Shakespeare Shakespeare was that he was writing for a popular audience that which in some ways had not really existed before and didn't really exist after him because of the way culture changed. So, but when he was writing, he had to fill a theater with everybody, with people regardless of their education levels, their social class, gender, race, insofar as that's a factor in this period. He had to be able to please a genuine cross-section of the population. And that almost never happens anymore because of the way culture has subdivided.
Yeah.
And, if there's a Shakespeare production on in the city today, the one thing I can tell you is that the audience going to that are not the same audience as the ones going to the monster truck pull down the street.
Yeah, that's true. I would probably be at the monster truck show.
Yeah, well, that's fair. But my point is that.
Sorry.
But my point is that for part of what makes Shakespeare Shakespeare is that he had to please both audiences.
Yeah.
In his day,
and he was able to. Yeah.
Able to. So, what I think is really cool about Shakespeare is that the plays are, in modern sort of quote literary standards, are sensational. There's stories of murder and witchcraft and magic and fairies and all kinds of weird stuff, right?
Oh yeah, there's some twisted stuff that are like. Go ahead.
Yeah, but at the same time, they're incredibly sophisticated and complicated in terms of their sentence level articulation, their representation of character and ideas and issues, all that sort of stuff. So there's no paradox there in something which is absolutely populist and rich and complex, right? And so I think we need more of this. And I think that when any artist, a popular artist, is doing something that is actually more sophisticated than people realize, then I think it's worth drawing attention to that. And I think that BABYMETAL is one of those bands that are exploring complex ideas and emotions and doing it with power and passion and beauty and and the performativity of it as well, because Shakespeare's not a novelist, he's a playwright.
Right.
He's writing specifically for the stage and for the way that is, when you read a Shakespeare text, it's a script. It's the beginning of the art object. It's not the end of the art object.
Right.
The art object is in front of you. And in his technology, it's about being in the same space as the actors, sharing that space and being part of that community. And I think that's a very BABYMETAL idea, right? The idea that what they're really about is about drawing people together, becoming one with the audience, and standing for things that they think that the audience celebrates and values. Yeah,
I can see that. I see that too. And yeah. Man. And let's say one thing we're let's say about Shakespeare, let's say Othello. I know a little bit about that. I know maybe like a monster truck guy, but I like how he's able to go into depths about like creating this story about paranoia and how it seeps in and how we could easily be deceived by our own, well, I guess ears and stuff. Someone could be in our ear and tell us things. It's a very human thing, and sometimes very relatable, and it transcends time. Kind of like something with Baby Metal, which we mentioned with Headbanger, how it's like it's a song about a moment that people could relate to, a moment that's very relatable. So it's becomes timeless almost. So yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool. Now, what about other bands? What other bands do you cover on? I know you mentioned one already. Any other bands that you cover on your channel?
I mean, as I say, at the moment, the other band that I talk the most about are Atarashi Gakko, who I've been following for a few years, but which have really sort of taken off internationally and in Japan just in the last year. It's funny, they had a song that they released like 3 years ago, more than 3 years ago, called Otonna Buru, which, was released without much fanfare, didn't get a lot of attention. And then year became this weird TikTok viral sensation. I read somewhere that there have been over 3 billion TikTok views or something of videos related to this song, and it has sort of launched them in unprecedented ways.
Wow.
And suddenly they've become this massive act in Japan. They're going to be on the New Year, the Kohaku show, and they're getting awards and all sorts of stuff. And they just did their first US tour, which I got to see, and they're fantastic. I love them. I also got to see earlier this year, I've seen a number of Japanese bands that I saw in Japan. I saw Polka Dot Stingray, who are one of my favorite. They're a little bit more poppy, but especially in their early stuff, much more sort of jazz and funk influenced, and with a fantastic guitarist, a rock guitarist. I really like them, and I got to see them live. Also, Oral Cigarettes. Again, very. I wouldn't call them pop. I guess you would call them a rock band with a lot of rap influences.
Okay.
Well, Tsuji Bungaku, a 3-piece. Glim Spanky. I really like Glim Spanky. I got to see them earlier this year as well.
Oh wow.
Nagano band, a duo with a sort of straight rock sound, but very retro, very sort of 60s, 70s psychedelia and stuff in there. Really, I really like them. And part of what I like about a lot of these bands is that they write really solid songs.
Mm-hmm.
Just about the performance, the songs themselves are structurally really good, really well put together, well thought through. Yeah.
That's really cool, man. And I've recognized some of those bands you mentioned, Glim Spanky, Oral Cigarettes. Well, I don't react to a lot of them. I've reacted to them here and there. And of course, I see that you have a Gotrek Spin, a Deep Dive.
Yeah.
I am a huge fan of them. They're amazing. The Kachiyama. I haven't seen your video on it, but it says Japanese folklore and office politics.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, check it out, because actually I think it does speak to some of the things that you were talking about the way that sort of cultural history, contemporary Japan sort of come together. I think it's an interesting song.
And we have a question in the chat. It says, "Hi, Professor. What do you think about Amour and the supposed twin song of Akatsuki?"
Okay, so yes, I think that there's a sort of connection between Amore and Katsuki. Sort of the shift of the red moon into the sort of the blue star kind of thing.
Okay.
And they are both they're both songs that reflect on love in a kind of quasi-romantic way, in fairly unspecific terms. Again, very baby metal, inviting you to sort of add your own specifics in order to sort of connect to the song. I think Amore becomes a little bit more metaphysical than it is simply romantic. And in that sense, I think it's a more mature song, even though I think in some ways I like Akatsuki better.
Yeah.
But the version of love that is being talked about in Amore is, I think, more about a sort of general outpouring of goodwill to the planet
Oh,
than it
okay.
is a relationship with another human person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I
I
get
think
that.
they grow out of the same impulse. Yeah.
Okay. That's pretty cool. I didn't even know those two songs were really connected that way. So I'll definitely learn something here today. This was actually a really cool chat, AJ. I gotta feel like it was educational, but yet fun. It was you are the baby metal professor.
Thanks, man.
like that. That is a cool title. That is a cool title. I hope you don't mind being called that.
That's fine.
Oh man, this is so cool. I gotta invite you on again to talk about Gotrek Spin, because I could do an hour talking about them as well. But it was great having you on, and I know it was a brunch. I didn't have any alcohol at all. This is not a brunch. No Bloody Mary or you know.
Next time.
Yeah, next time. So chat, if there's any other question, this is it. This is last. There's a 15-second delay between the chat and the stream. So for 15 seconds, what is your favorite Gotrek Spin song? I would talk about them a little bit.
I mean, Kachikachiyama is probably up there at the moment.
Yeah.
I have an odd relationship with them. I've dipped into them over the last few years. Sometimes I really like this stuff, and sometimes I'm sort of baffled by it and I don't get it. Not intellectually, but it just doesn't grab me aesthetically. Because it's not like they don't have a single sound, and they've shifted quite a bit over the years, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, their songs can go from, they have songs that sound straight up metal at times, and then they have songs that sound like more like kind of like punk or like more that. Well, they have like electro elements in there. That's more like a pop sort of sound sometimes. They vary quite a bit.
I don't think I don't have a problem with
Yeah.
that. I actually like bands that are prepared to sort of experiment and try different sounds and stuff. I like that. But the downside, the risk, of course, is that your audience is not always going to follow you.
Oh, I'll follow them though. F. Chapakoga, she is a great bass player. And one thing I like, no matter how different the song is, she's slapping that bass, and I love the way it sounds. I'm like, all right.
You should check out Polka Dot Stingray, because if you like that bass sound, you might like Polka Dot Stingray.
Oh, I'm gonna write that down. Polka Dot Stingray.
Yeah.
All right. And then we have one more question here from Kevin. He says, "What would be the best way to learn Japanese? I don't have access to a teacher or class." So
that's a tough one. I mean, it's a really tough one. My wife is a Duolingo machine. She's on it all the time. But, there are, you're going to need a certain amount of grammar, and there are workbooks and things that you can get that will sort of force you to learn how to write kanji. I've never been very good at kanji. My wife is much better at that stuff. But my Japanese is mostly conversational, spoken Japanese, and that's limited by not being able to read and write kanji really sophisticatedly. But I would say that more interaction you can have with actual people, and as you say, you can't, if you don't to take a class, there are people online who you can become sort of the cyber equivalent of pen pals with, people who will have like little video conversations with you. Some of them you have to pay, some of them might be looking to practice their English and you're looking to practice your Japanese. And if you can find that relationship, I think that can be good, because one of the problems with studying Japanese as it's written is that frequently how it's spoken, and to really learn the language, you need to be immersed in the culture and hearing it all the time and speaking it all the time. But you also need, as I discovered, the first year I was in Japan, I learned surprisingly little because I hadn't done the study. I hadn't sort of looked at the written stuff and the grammar and all that kind of thing. I thought I would just magically absorb it, like I would absorb, French or Italian or something like that. But it's just too different from English. I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So I had to do much more study as well. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a really good question. Really good answer. Well, AJ Hartley, it was great having you on Rant and Chill.
Thanks, man.
People have been wanting this to happen for a while. We finally did it. All right, man. I actually feel like I learned something here today. It was cool. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
You take it easy. Have a good one. And chat, you have a good one too, okay? All right.
Thanks. That's it. Thanks particularly, obviously, to Deadman over at Rant and Chill. I'll include a link to his YouTube channel in the description. And as usual, please like, comment, subscribe, check out my books, check out my Patreon page. Thanks to my patrons. And I will talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.